Hello and welcome. I am so excited that you said yes, that you are committed to understanding how to harness and develop your sales skills as the world of sales moves into a new normal of sales in this machine age, aka the digital age. Hello, my name is Leena Parmar. I am an entrepreneur, a speaker, and a career mastery instructor coming to you from the United Kingdom. I am the founder of Citrus Connect, who is hosting this webinar today. We have been in the recruitment industry for 10 plus years now, successfully placing candidates in all types of sales roles, business to consumer, small to medium sized businesses, big multi-million, billion-pound global clients. So sales is what we know best in terms of what our clients are looking for now and in the future. So today we're going to dive into some expert knowledge of what it takes to develop your skills to play in the sales, negotiation, and marketing arena through this crisis and any other crisis that might hit us. For most high achievers and most success stories, they're not created at the top of an economic cycle. They're actually created right now. High achiever stories, success stories are created in the recession, in the upcoming depression. So we will talk today about how you can set yourself up for success and how you can close higher, close more, and close faster. Okay, so when we go through everything today, please make sure that you are as comfortable as you can be. Stay focused because Jan is going to share some really great and deep stuff for you. So turn your phone off, turn off any distractions, as our guest speaker is going to go through so much today. And he does have an amazing gift, an opportunity for you at the end. So do stay on through to the end of this webinar. So this seminar is not for you if you are not committed to yourself and your future. This training is not for you if you are looking for a quick fix. However, this training is for you if you are here for the long haul. If you are truly committed to showing up and digging deep into your self-awareness and what it takes to be the best sales negotiator during and after this crisis. So without further ado, I would like to introduce an amazing man by the name of Jan Potgieter, a world-renowned sales and negotiation trainer who has trained the elites of Adidas, Vodafone, IBM, NHS, Nokia, and so many more. He's the founder and the CEO of Jan Potgieter and Associates and Imperium Negotiations, which is a sales and training negotiation academy. His methods have led companies to close more deals than ever before, but in a more strategic, scientific, and aligned way, which is so effortless that leaves both parties feeling a sense of win-win, which is the ideal to any sales situation. He himself started on the ground selling and negotiating, outperforming all his counterparts, closing million-dollar deals, delivering in over 60 countries, which then later led him to develop his own training methods, and he has trained all types of sales negotiators from business to consumer to really complex business to business transactions. I personally have had the privilege to get to know Jan and his amazing wife, Linda, over the last 3 to 4 years, and it's been a pleasure watching both of them rise to the top of their game. I have learned so much from both of you, professionally and personally. So thank you so much, Jan, for taking time out of your diary today, because I know that you're a busy man from the tropics of Cape Town, to teach us today about what the future holds in and after this chaos. So let's get into it. Jan, for us, the biggest fear that our clients and candidates have is the fear of change, and I guess the fear of the unknown. So, in your opinion, what's been the biggest change that we've seen in the sales and negotiation process since this global crisis began?
Thank you for your introduction and your kind words, Leena. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you over the past few years, and I really take a lot of pride in our association and me being here. You know, you're a woman of high integrity, and you work with the utmost degree of professionalism and excellence, and it's really a privilege for me to be here with you. In response to your question, I think the biggest change that we've seen since this crisis has hit is the crumbling of resistance to interacting digitally. So it's been the saving grace in so many different industries, and I know I have been really pushing to get some of my clients to adopt a digital model of doing business with me and transacting with me over the past 2, maybe 3 years, and there's been high resistance to it, and of course that's all diminished now, significantly so. So that's the biggest change that I think that we've seen, and the impact of that on sales, of course, is now we've lost that ability to maybe connect with our clients, in a physical sense, and the chemistry and the climate that accompanies that that physical presence and interaction has been significantly watered down by using digital means of communication. However, there's also a significant upside. If you cast yourself a little bit into the future and you see us becoming more and more comfortable with digital means of communication, negotiation, and selling, now this might be the very opportunity that we can really bring big data to the way that we sell, to the way that we close deals and approach deal making. You can now you can picture a world where you can do sales calls on video. You can record those sales calls. You can ask your clients whether they'd be prepared for you to record the call, your prospects, for quality assurance and process improvement. And then you can analyze those videos. In the past, it'd be very difficult to do that, to follow around your salespeople and record them as they interact with prospects, etc. So there are opportunities out there that we haven't even thought about yet that we'll be able to capitalize on as we move more and more of our interactions to kind of the digital format. The digital format also brings us the opportunity to bring much more design to the way that we interact with our counterparts. We can have access to scripts and prompts and a whole bunch of things that supporting tools that we wouldn't necessarily have access to if we were negotiating, closing deals, selling face to face. So I think there's much reason to be optimistic that this change is not necessarily going to be bad for sales, but might actually be very good for sales. People have been forecasting the demise of the salesperson for a long, long time, and it's not something that I think that we're going to see as a result of what's happened here. I think there's just going to be a shift. There's going to be a pivot in the way that we sell. I don't think that it's necessarily going to be bad news for salespeople at all. I think as we get our head around this new way of doing things, we're going to see sales playing as vital a role as it ever has. As long as people are doing the buying, we need people to do the selling. So I don't think it's any reason to panic. I think it's just a reason to pivot.
Thank you, Jan. Such great insight there. I've personally witnessed myself less and less resistance to the digitalization, mainly because my clients have been forced into it. Because we, as a recruitment agency, a lot of agencies have seen their income stop, but we've still managed to place some candidates in the last few months as clients and candidates both adjust to this normal, but a new normal of digital. And I love how you say that this is a reason not to panic, but actually to pivot. And as someone who speaks to business owners of all sizes on a daily basis, I can wholeheartedly say that all of my clients have pivoted and still managed to create an income. But what's really interesting is how we now perfect that pivot so we can get closer to, if not match, the type of income we were earning when we were purchasing or selling offline. So really, really great insight there. Thank you so much. Now, I know when I first met you, I was really perplexed by the concept of negotiation and how that fit into sales, and asking whether sales is negotiation. I know you answered that question for me personally, but on behalf of our audience today, can I ask you to clarify what is negotiation and how does that frame the sales process?
So, Leena, most people, when they think about negotiation, we think about something that happens at the United Nations, or, we think it's something that happens in the peace process in the Middle East or Northern Ireland. But negotiation, as a matter of fact, is something we do every day. The original definition of the word negotiate, as you see here, meant anything that you do that isn't leisure, right? In the modern day, we really misunderstand negotiation. It's restricted to an event rather than an ongoing process. Most people think that negotiation is an event in the sales process, right? So if you look at just about every sales process out there, including the complex sales methodologies, Miller-Hyman, target account selling, solution selling, all these kind of methodologies, they all describe negotiation as a step in the negotiation process. Now, if this is the way that you've been thinking about negotiation, then there's a wonderful opportunity for you. Most of the value probably has escaped already if you only get yourself ready to negotiate when you get to the terms and conditions, or when you get to discuss the price, talk turkey, talk the details of the deal. Because as a matter of fact, negotiation starts the very first time that you interact with your prospect, with your counterpart. Because right here in the beginning, you're framing the context for the engagement, for what's to follow. You're creating anchors, reference points. You're setting yourself up to create satisfaction as you progress through the sales process. Then you do get to the part where there is negotiation around the contract element, if you will. But equally, you also don't just negotiate when you're making the deal, as you see here, but also when you have to manage the deal or when you have to mend the deal. So a lot of people, when they think about the sales process, when they think about negotiation, they think that negotiation is a subcomponent of the sales process. But as a matter of fact, it's the inverse. It's the opposite. Negotiation is doing business, and part of doing business is selling. What's responsible for this mindset is the way that, business has really developed over the last 30, 40 years, where we've become stuck or caught up in an environment where we have these massive organizations where it's not unusual for, FTSE 100 or Fortune 500 companies to employ hundreds of thousands of people. It's crazy if you look at, this current season that we're in. I think Amazon has been recruiting something like 300,000 people to keep up with demand, in the US and around the world. That's just one company recruiting. They already employ something like 600,000 people. In the UK, the NHS employs more than 1 million people. The consequence of these big organizations is that people have to create processes and structures to be able to manage these large organizations. So what we do is we create functional silos. We create a department that's responsible for procurement. We create a department that's responsible for marketing, for sales, for human resources, for finance. And so people forget that they're all in there doing business and negotiating. To sell is really not something that's restricted to the sales function. Everybody sells. If you're in procurement, what are you doing? You're just selling your version of the budget, right? You're forever selling your projects, your skills, your opinions, your arguments. So it's not useful to compartmentalize negotiation or sales. You're always negotiating, and effectively you're always selling. That's just how it works. But if we look at negotiation maybe one level deeper, if you look at the scale here, you can see that at the one end we have litigation, at the other end we have negotiation. So it's also important that we understand what we mean when we say the word negotiation, because the way that you will approach your sales negotiation will be highly influenced by what you understand negotiation to be. Right now, in most of the business world, the mistake is made that negotiation looks a lot more like litigation, which is the case. If you look here, one party presents their evidence, the other party presents their evidence, and then you need a third party to make a decision, to make a call. This is often what the sales process looks like. You've got some product, you've got a deck, boilerplate, a pitch deck, and you throw that at your prospects, and you justify your proposition. You tell them why it's the best product or service on the face of the planet. You sing the praises of your product. You present the evidence in support of your case. And then what you're really doing is you're provoking your counterpart to respond with their evidence. And that's why you often get stuck, particularly in the B2B corporate environment. Often sales negotiations need to be escalated because you can't find agreement just between the two of you or between you and corporate procurement, because everybody is responding defensively and justifying their value propositions. So arbitration is just one move towards negotiation. At least in this case, we can decide who the judge is, but we still have to comply with their decision. Mediation, now we get somebody to help us to try and find some kind of agreement, but we're not obliged to follow their recommendation. And then negotiation means we work out a deal just between the two of us. So this is where the skill lies, to understand what there is to do, how it is that you can approach the sales process, from such an angle where we can find a deal between the two of us without having to lead with the evidence. Because when we lead with the evidence, we end up in this situation where we provoke the equal and opposite response from our counterparts. We just provoke objections. This is why it's far more useful to look at human nature, to understand what we can do to get our counterparts to move in our direction, to get our prospects to buy from us, right? Far better than relying on the evidence, because we see what happens with the evidence. We lead with the evidence, we provoke the objections, right? We provoke the equal and opposite response. If I lead with the evidence, I just provoke you to go get the evidence that supports your perspective. So far better for us to rely on human nature to see what it is that we can do to create movement towards agreement, right? To be persuasive in the way that we get our counterparts to agree to our proposals, to our suggestions. So looking at the definition of human nature, it's the fundamental dispositions or traits of humans, right? So humans are remarkably irrational, and at the same time, they are remarkably predictable in how they are irrational. So if we examine one of the key principles that underpin human nature, and in this principle lies 9/10 of sales success. If you get this principle, then you can't help but be successful in the world of sales, right? And that's the principle of reciprocity, which basically states that we return to others the form of behavior that they exhibit towards us, right? So if you can understand this principle, it means that if you want somebody to do something for you, you have to do something for them, right? If you just think about this, every culture in the world, every religion, in some way or form embrace this notion of reciprocity. Some call it karma, some call it sowing and reaping. There's any number of descriptions for this principle, the principle of reciprocity. But it is truly powerful if you get this. It means, if you really understand it, it means that if you really focus on dealing with objections coming from your counterparts, it's because you don't really understand this principle of reciprocity, right? You are getting a lot of objections because you're provoking them. Whatever it is that you're doing is resulting in those objections coming back to you. That's the principle of reciprocity at work. So it's really powerful if you can move from negotiating by default to negotiating by design, to approaching your sales from a perspective where you've matched every element of the sales process with negotiation best practice. And that'll enable you to violate the principle of reciprocity so that you can make sure that you optimize the likelihood of your counterparts saying yes to your requests. So you really want to get to the stage where you harness the principle of reciprocity rather than be a victim to the principle of reciprocity. Think about it. If you don't bring design to the way that you engage with your counterparts, then you're really letting them dictate how you will be conducting yourself. So you need to take absolute control of the sales process, and you will provoke the kind of responses that will advance you towards deal making, right? If you're not taking control of the sales process, if you've not designed it, if you're not doing it by meticulous design, then you leave yourself open to completely average results because you're just going to be responding reciprocally to whatever it is that your prospect puts out there. And here's the thing, this is maybe going to be surprising to you, but concessions is the key to forward movement, to reaching agreement. Justification is a loser's game. Most people just don't understand how to use this principle of reciprocity to their advantage. When you listen to most sales training, negotiation training, people just advocate against almost never making concessions. No, you must build and justify the value. You must create value before you can claim value. All those things are true, but you never win the argument by leading with the evidence, right? You just provoke the equal and opposite response. You have to build into your sales process, into your approach, this principle of reciprocity. And what that looks like practically is that you make concessions. You make concessions to get concessions. If you want to create movement towards agreement, it means you have to initiate it. You have to be the first to make concessions.
Thank you, Jan. Such amazing content. Reciprocity was the first thing I took away from our first interaction. And, to our audience today, if you can take anything away from this training, it would be that. It really changed the way that I did business. Also, seeing that making concessions was actually a strength of mine and not a weakness was also a huge game changer for me personally. So much wisdom there, Jan. Thank you. Now, I know your methodology teaches the different characteristics of pro-level sales negotiators. So can you explain what are those characteristics and why they're important?
So over the past 17 years, I've studied the characteristics of elite level business negotiators. I've looked at the world of sports, I've looked at business, I've looked at politics, and I've looked at the arts world to see what the common characteristics are of successful people in these areas, specifically when it comes to business negotiation. Let me share with you some of my insights by showing you a couple of slides here. Let's jump right into the first one, which is, to some extent, I think by far the most important one in the context of sales negotiations, which is people skills. People who have elite level business negotiation results, they have very good people skills. Now, don't make the mistake by thinking that if you describe somebody as having good people skills, that we're necessarily saying that they are nice people, right? You could make a very good claim that Adolf Hitler had great people skills. If you ever seen any video footage of him talking, or you understand that he was a very effective campaigner, then you might agree that he had very good people skills. But of course, he put those to nefarious and evil use. He was very decidedly negative in his manipulation based on his understanding of people, right? So we see this also with con men, confidence tricksters, right? They have incredible people skills. So don't make the mistake of thinking that if somebody has good people skills, that they're necessarily a nice person, right? But how do you know that successful people at the top of the pile in organizations and businesses, that they have good people skills? You know why? Because you need the support of a whole lot of people to be successful. Success is never an individual game. And you need to understand how to garner the support of people, how to get them to advocate on your behalf, how to overcome the objections that people will present you with as you progress your career, as you try to achieve success. And there is, when you look at the elite level performers, they have a great awareness of their own competencies, preferences, and behavior. They have a very high degree of self-awareness. They know what their strengths are. They know what their weaknesses are. And they work relentlessly on mitigating their weaknesses and further capitalizing on their strengths, further developing their strengths, right? They have great persuasive communication and influencing skills. And you have to have the ability to cast a vision, to lead and influence others. So confidence is such a central part to leading people. People don't follow people who are not confident. People don't follow the recommendations of people that are not confident. And people do not buy from salespeople who lack confidence, right? You can't sell Coca-Cola if you got Pepsi in the fridge. If you don't look like you believe in what you're saying, if you don't say what you're saying with conviction, if you don't appear confident in the way that you transmit your value proposition, well, guess what? If you don't buy it, why will your counterparts buy it, right? So if you look at this high degree of personal awareness and people skills, there's a framework that we use, which I'm going to use to explain this. We all have different preferences for different parts of the communication framework here, which we're looking at, which is the HBDI model, based on the research done by Dr. Roger Sperry, who studied the work of a famous surgeon, Philip Vogel, in the 1960s, where he physically separated the left side from the right side of the brain of people, a group of patients who suffered from severe epileptic seizures. And he cut through these millions of connecting strands, the corpus callosum, because he wanted to stop these seizures by, at that time they'd recognize that it's a brainstorm that originates in one hemisphere of the brain, spreads to the other, that then sends these confusing signals which causes the seizure. And so he thought by separating, by cutting off any kind of communication between the two hemispheres, he might stop the seizures. And it was spectacularly successful. They did expect some other side effects to manifest. And to make a long story short, what happened is that they realized when you split the hardware, you also effectively split or separate the software. So they discovered, Dr. Roger Sperry in his research, for which he won the Nobel Prize in 1981, you can go find his stuff on Google if you want to take a look at it. But they discovered basically different parts of the mind, of the brain, deal with different things. Now, you've seen these things on Facebook that says, are you right-brained or are you left-brained? And so this is what this model reflects. But I want to use this as an example for you to understand a framework for decision-making, a framework for communication that is incredibly useful in the context of selling, right? So this model divides our preferences into 4 different quadrants here. Now, preferences are distinct from competencies, right? So preference is a particularly good way of predicting behavior because we tend to do what we like to do. We don't tend to do just that which we're capable of doing, right? So think for yourself. If capability of competence was a great predictor of behavior, then nobody would exceed the speed limit. We'd all respect all the regulations around lockdown all the time. We'd all brush our teeth and floss twice a day. We'd exercise at least 3 times a week for half an hour and so forth. These are all the things that the experts tell us to do, but we end up doing what our preferences dictate, right? So if you have a preference in this blue quadrant, the rational self, then you like to be analytical, logical, critical. You like for things to be realistic. You just kind of know how things work. If you have a preference in the green quadrant, well, then often it's more important for you to be in control of the environment rather than to be subject to the environment. So you like to take preventative action, you favor established procedures. Your focus is on the practical dimension, getting things done. So folks who have a preference in this quadrant, they tend to be highly reliable, organized, punctual, very good at planning and execution. Then we have those who have a preference in the red quadrant, and this is more the emotional quadrant, if you will. This is the way that we connect to people, relate to others. So people who have a strong preference here, they like to be in environments where there's a high degree of interaction with others. They can be quite kinesthetic, touchy-feely. Often they characterized or described as people who are very expressive, emotional, very talkative, often talk about their feelings. And then we have those who have a preference in the yellow quadrant. And, for these folks, the past is not necessarily a reference to the future. They often just solution-minded. Many salespeople fall into this category where, they're trying to be creative and create solutions. And so if you look at these 4 quadrants, we know from the data, if we look at this, that less than 3% of the population express an equal preference for all 4 of these quadrants, and equally less than 3% of the population express a preference for only 1 of the 4 quadrants. So it's most likely you're going to have a preference for either 2 or 3 of those quadrants. And the interesting thing is, this is what you're going to bring to your sales approach, right? You're going to bring your filter, which is your set of preferences, to bear in every sales conversation that you have, in every sales negotiation interaction that you have. And so, it's very important if you want to get people, that you understand that people are motivated by different things than what motivates you. And, it's far better for you to articulate your value proposition, to present, your sales proposition in such a way that it's most likely to resonate with your counterpart's preferences rather than yours. So often we get excited and we think, if you think about this practically, we think, no, it's all about the price, it's all about the research, it's all about the evidence, the validation. It's such a great product. But that's not what our counterparts are after. They want to know what the impact might be on people. They want to understand what we're going to do to manage the risks. How innovative is the product? How future-proof is it, particularly in a time of change? So these are all the things that we need to think about and articulate when we're trying to give our counterparts things to latch onto, right? It's all about using the right bait. You can go to a lake to catch fish, but if you have the wrong bait, then they're not going to get on the hook, right? So you have to bait the hook with the kind of bait that appeals to the fish that you're trying to catch. So people skills are vital in terms of understanding what motivates people. The second element to this, and specific to the way that we negotiate, is that you have to understand where you fit into this framework here. Where does your preference lie? Are you competitive naturally? Are you accommodating? Do you tend to avoid difficult conversations? Do you struggle with objections? Would you rather just discount and give it away rather than deal with the objections coming your way? Are you a compromiser? Do you just grab the first deal that's offered? Do you have the ability to truly collaborate? Because to collaborate means that you're being both assertive and cooperative, right? Most people in the English language, we think of collaborate, we think of we confuse the two words. We mean accommodate when we use the word collaborate. A collaborative mode of engagement is a highly assertive one. It's not just a highly cooperative mode. Often we get it wrong, though. We want to collaborate and we lead with an assertive engagement style. Our counterparts experience that as being competitive, and they reciprocate with a competitive response. So if you want to be collaborative, you have to be cooperative in the first instance. You can't claim value until you've created value. So it's very interesting. You can see that there's so much more to people than what meets the eye. There's so much more to human nature than what meets the eye. And if you can study people, if you can know more about people than you do about your product, service, or solution, you will be unusually successful. Most people invest all their time, energy, and effort into understanding their products and services. Sure, you got to know that. But if you know more about people, if you know more about human nature, if you know how to provoke the right kind of reciprocity from your counterparts, you'll be far more successful than you will ever be based on your product knowledge. The second characteristic that we see shared by elite level sales negotiators, business negotiators, is that they are teachable, right? So, the fascinating thing for me is, the higher up in an organization that I've worked, the more senior the audience, the more teachable people are, the more open they are to new ideas, different ways of doing things. And it's fascinating when you consider this, because at the top of organizations, and that's true whether it's in politics, sports, the arts, or business, they are surrounded by coaches, by trainers, by consultants. They realize that success is not a one-person game. Right? If you want to be a successful leader, it's going to require you to take the counsel, to rely on the counsel, input, correction, editing of others. Everybody needs an editor, right? The lower you go down in organizations, the more resistant people are to new ideas, the more resistant they are to coaching and to correction. You know what? The moment that you think that you've mastered something, you can never get any better results because you're not open to improving your results. The moment you think you're good at sales, the moment you think you're good at negotiating, well, guess what? You're not learning anything new. You've reached your ceiling. You will never get any better. Your results will never improve. Also, don't think because you've done something once that you've now got it covered. Yes, you went through sales training once. You went through negotiation training once. So now you understand how to sell. Now you understand how to negotiate. No, that's not true. That's not true. You can go through sales negotiation training 50 times and you will not master it all. I've been in this game for almost 20 years now, and I've trained more than 10,000 salespeople, something in the order of 2,000 professional buyers in 65 countries over the last 18 years. And I tell you, I learn something new about negotiation and about selling every week, because I make it my business to learn something new every week. You can never stop learning, but you have to have the open mind. You have to have you have to be positioned to learn. And when you learn something new, by definition, it feels uncomfortable. When you remain in your comfort zone, you're not learning something new. So you have to be prepared to make yourself vulnerable, to step outside of your comfort zone if you want to continually improve your results. So I challenge you, go find me an elite level performer in sports, in the arts, in politics, in business that's not surrounded by coaches, by trainers, by consultants. They don't exist. They don't exist. The third characteristic is the characteristic of courage. right? So if you're going to be successful, it's going to demand courage. In the context of sales negotiations, you're going to have to be prepared to swim upstream. You're going to be. You would probably agree with me that if you want exceptional results, it's not going to be adequate for you to do average things. If you do average things, you're going to get average results. If you want exceptional results, you're going to have to do counterintuitive and exceptional things. But here's the problem. The moment you start doing things that are counterintuitive, the moment you step outside of the mold, particularly within your team, within your sales team, within your immediate corporate environment, then people resist you, right? Because you come up with a new idea, a different way of doing things. It's not natural for people to want to follow you. I don't know if you've ever seen this show, The Deadliest Catch on Discovery, but they have these crabs that they catch in the North Atlantic, in the Bering Sea, and they toss them in these big buckets, but they never put a lid in the bucket, because the moment a crab tries to climb out, guess what? The other crabs just pull them back in. That's kind of how we are as people, right? The moment you do something counterintuitive, then people start holding you back. So it's gonna take courage for you to pursue a path of success, because the path to success is not one that's heavily populated, right? There are not many people on that path. So it gets lonely, and you will meet opposition, and it's going to demand courage from you to push through. It's also, you're going to have the resolve to stick with it when you're not getting results immediately. So often when you try something new, you can conclude that it doesn't work, but it's often that you've just not mastered that skill. You've just not had enough opportunity to practice it. So it does take courage if you want to be successful. The fourth characteristic of elite level success is heightened ambition, right? You guys know Michael Phelps. You might have heard of Michael Phelps. I think he won 28 medals at the Olympic Games, of which 25 were gold. So only 3 of them weren't gold. I think they were silver. I'm not sure if there was a bronze in there. But here's the interview, or here's the feedback you've never heard Michael Phelps give after winning a gold medal. You stick the microphone in his face, and here's what he never said. Well, you know what? I just kind of got in the pool, and I just gave it my best, and bam, out popped that gold. I wasn't expecting it. No, nobody has ever been surprised by winning a gold medal at the Olympic Games. You only win the gold medal if you plan for it. If you were prepared to sacrifice and do what others were not prepared to do. It's the same thing in negotiation, in selling. If you don't demand success, it is not going to surprise you. It's not going to turn up uninvited. Success never turns up uninvited and overnight. It's always the result of a plan. Sir Steve Redgrave, many of you might know who he is. He won 5 gold medals at 5 consecutive Olympic Games. So for 20 years, he dominated rowing, right? And if you read his book, he describes there in detail how on Christmas Day and New Year's Day, he would go out rowing. He would go out practicing, because he knew that on those 2 days, his competitors were recovering from their hangovers or stuffing their faces. And so he didn't think that would give him the physical edge, those 2 days worth of extra training, but it gave him the mental edge, because it demonstrated to him that he wanted to win more than they do. That he was prepared to sacrifice more than they were. So in the context of your sales negotiations, you have to be prepared to ask the questions that your competitors won't ask. You have to be ambitious. You have to be prepared to put in almost the ridiculous offers, so that you leave yourself room to create satisfaction, to make concessions, to negotiate. You have to be highly ambitious, and it means that you have to be confident if you want to be successful. The fifth characteristic is consistency, right? So where you are today is 100% the result, the total sum of your habits. It's the result of your habits. That's where you are today. So if you want to improve your results, you have to measure what it is that you're doing. So basic business theory states that which you can't, or that which you don't measure, you simply cannot improve, right? So you can't take a guess if you're a good sales negotiator or not. I mean, it's fascinating for me when I work with new companies, or it's the first time I work with a company. One of the questions I always ask them is, so tell me, do you guys think that you're very good at sales negotiation, or do you think that you're no good at sales negotiation? And I'm not really interested in, of course I am interested, but I'm not most interested in their response as to whether they think they're good or bad. But I'm really interested in the answer to the second question, which is, how do you know? How do you know if you're good? How do you know if you're bad? Because whatever they say, my follow-on question is, okay, can I see the way that you measure that? Because if you don't measure it, you don't know. You're taking a guess, right? You might be successful because of market dynamics. You might be successful because your competitors suck. But what happens the moment they improve? Do you track your success? Do you have a set process that you use? Do you use scripts? Have you optimized scripts in parts of your sales process? Not all parts of the sales process lend themselves to using scripts, but certainly some do. And those that don't, are you completing a preparation checklist? So do you have a standardized approach to the way that you sell? If you don't, there's huge room for improvement, right? Because you're not measuring your results. So it's key to have structure in the way that you approach your sales. Can make an incredible difference to your results. And then the last characteristic of success is fun. Mastery is always reflected through fun. Usain Bolt, he's the grand master of them all. You can see he has so much fun when he's out there performing. The great masters, they are never paralyzed by fear or anxiety when it comes to performance, right? When it comes to getting on the stage. Usain Bolt doesn't sit there the morning of the 100-meter final at the Rio Olympics and think to himself, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. I have to go perform in front of all these people. The whole world be watching me. No, he wakes up that morning. I guarantee you he's got a flutter in his tummy, right? But and there's been plenty of research on this. If you the master of the game, that flutter in the tummy, that anticipation, that's expressed as excitement, not as anxiety, right? So he feels excitement. This is probably the clearest indication as to what your level of skill is when it comes to sales and sales negotiation, is if you feel nervous when you're selling, if you feel, when you got to go meet corporate procurement and you feel, so anxious, you're not sleeping the night before, you're burning up with indigestion just of the thought of dealing with senior executives, and having peer-to-peer meetings with CEOs, then it means you've not mastered the game, right? If you've mastered your craft, then it's going to provoke excitement, not anxiety. So that's your clearest measure of where you are on the scale of elite level performance.
Thanks for that insight there, Jan. So powerful. So now for the killer question, the question that everybody has been waiting for, the question why they are here today, and why they are joining us from all over the world. Now, we are seeing a change into more and more digital sales processes. So as someone who has trained the elites of companies like Adidas, Pfizer, IBM, Vodafone, and so many more, as a seasoned professional in sales and negotiation, how do you see the future of sales and the possible digitalization of sales and the sales process itself?
So, looking into the future, it's really difficult to say exactly what sales is going to look like. What we do know is that it's going to continue to change. What it's going to look like 5 years from now, I suspect will be significantly different to what it's looking like right now. It's going to probably look different 6 months from now, never mind 5 years from now. What I do know is that a lot of these things that companies and people were resistant to in terms of the digital world will no longer be there offering resistance. So I think, this whole crisis has opened up for people, the ability to use this medium of communication, to use digital communication as a primary means of communication, not a secondary means of communication. And that's going to have a significant impact on the sales process, on the approach that you can follow to be successful. Let me demonstrate through a couple of slides here what I'm talking about.
Let's take a look at this graphical depiction of the classic business-to-business sales negotiation process. On the left-hand side here, you start with whatever it is that you do to generate new opportunities, right? So whether that comes from existing relationships, referrals, it's organic outreach, social selling, paid outreach, whatever it is that you guys do, either within your organization or individually, to create new opportunities. Right, then you're going to be identifying stakeholders, You're going to work with each stakeholder, or you should be working with each stakeholder to diagnose their current undesired situation, also diagnose and identify their current their future desired situation. And then, of course, you're going to position your product, service, or solution as the bridge between those two things, right? Then you look at the next step, which is, submitting a proposal, a request for proposal here. Sometimes corporate procurement will be involved. Sometimes they won't. You'll be dealing with the business stakeholders. You'll have some kind of offer that you've submitted. They'll negotiate the contract terms with you. You'll close the deal. This part of the process is making the deal. Then you have to manage the deal and mend the deal. So we often forget that it's not just people at the forefront who, at the coalface who have impact on margin. It's also people who manage the deals that bleed margin when things go wrong, right? When scope changes or there's change requests, or when things go wrong and we have to mend things. There's margin at stake at each stage of the process. Then, so you can see this is a kind of the end-to-end sales negotiation process. And then at the bottom here, you can see we've divided that into the classical kind of sales elements, if you will: prospecting, qualification, needs analysis, offer, contract negotiation, and managing the deal. I've created another dimension here, strategic sales negotiation, which will encompass, that whole process, right from stakeholder identification right through to managing and mending the deal. And then the tactical part is really, the piece here from where we've submitted the proposal to closing the deal. That's the tactical part of the sales approach. Now, if you ask me what's going to be changing moving forward, is that we're going to have to bring so much more design to the sales process. We're going to have to be much more precise, because that's what the digital world brings. It brings the opportunity for us to be much more precise in our approach. If we sitting face to face across the table from somebody, there can be many opportunities for us to get distracted, for the conversation to go different places. When we're talking to people on the phone or video conferencing, these modes of engagements actually allow us to have scripted elements present. They allow us to have notes present outside of view. They allow us to use the real estate, as I'm doing here now, demonstrating to you, to have people's attention on visual anchors or points that we want to bring across strongly. So the demise of the sales role has been forecasted for a long, long time. Right from the beginning of the 19th century, people have been saying, well, we're not going to need salespeople anymore. The way that technology is changing, the way that things are changing, people can make decisions themselves. Even in today's day and age, that continues. We've gone beyond the information age into the machine age, and we have all these bots and all these artificial intelligence applications coming out. And once again, people are questioning the role of salespeople. But as long as it's people buying and not machines buying, salespeople will have a role. So I am convinced that the role of the salesperson will never diminish. It will change. But we will never have a lower ratio of salespeople than what we've ever had, right? As long as people are doing the buying, we're going to need people to do the selling. However, the way that we go about it, the changes that we can expect, it's worth looking at some of those things. And let's reference that back to what it is that we can do to be precise. So this first element of the sales process, right up from our outreach activities to opportunity identification to the submission of the first proposal, we can use templates and scripts for that whole process there. And I'll go a little more deeper into that in a moment. And for the other part of the sales process, we can use a preparation checklist, right? So we never have to shoot from the hip. There is a scientific way. Sure, sales is part art and it's part science. Most salespeople, if they're honest about it, that included me until I started doing this professionally, sell more on gut than we do on science. And that's great, and that will work for many situations. But if you want to get really good at this, you better harness science to support you in your efforts, right? So the elements that you have to practice to really get down, and this is interesting. Most salespeople, I find, are reluctant to run through simulations, and they're even reluctant to use scripts. Now, when I say a script, let me just qualify what I mean. I don't necessarily mean word for word. In some cases, absolutely, you should use word for word scripts when you have a narrow niche or niche defined. You can be very specific in the scripting that you use. But scripting allows you to consistently apply sales and negotiation best practice, to apply psychology consistently, right? And it's really simple in that context. The way that you approach the identification of needs after you've identified the stakeholders is really you diagnose it's as simple as this. You diagnose the current undesired situation in a way that engages them emotionally. People don't make decisions and they don't pull out their checkbooks unless they're emotionally engaged. And it doesn't matter if they're rational decision makers. Even rational decision makers make decisions emotionally first. It's always emotion first, and then we use reason to justify our decision. And then you want to be able to diagnose their future desired state or situation and position your product, service, or solution as the bridge between the two, right? So that can be scripted, that can be practiced, that should be practiced. If you're not running sales simulations and sales exercises weekly within your organization, then you most definitely have an opportunity to improve your results here. This is certainly in a time of change as we have now when we move to different platforms where we're finding ourselves selling, using video calls, using web conferences or phone calls more than we ever did in the past. You should be practicing those. You should be simulating them. The mother of skill is repetition, right? So when you look at professional sports people, you'll never see a professional footballer say, well, guess what? Just imagine Ronaldo saying, you know what, I'm just going to turn up to play matches, to play games. You know what, all this practice stuff in the middle, midweek practice, all that kind of stuff. I don't have to turn up for that. I'm the master. I'm Ronaldo. No, it would never occur to them to give up always being on top of the basics. Repetition is the mother of skill. They go through those things 100, 1,000, 100,000 times because they know that's what's responsible for their success. And they always stay on top of it. And, they repeat it 1,000,000 times. This is how you get really good. It's the opposite of what people think. People think that, just the next new little bit of knowledge, that's what's going to make us super successful. No. Mastering that which you already know and refining it, that is what's going to make you unusually successful. Similarly, the elements on the right-hand side here, when you're making the offers or when you're doing the actual contract negotiations, you can simulate those exchanges. You can simulate those sales meetings. And that's going to give you the confidence, that's going to give you the tools that you need to be successful in that situation, right? Because it's not the first time that you're there. You've created a reference pool. You've created muscle memory. So if you don't practice these things, it's a lot of people, the way that they like to learn or the way that they like to, tell themselves that they're learning is by reading books or watching videos. Imagine you want to improve your golf game and you get a video on improving your golf game, and you read some books, you watch some videos, and now you go play a round of golf and you're expecting to be better. You might be a little bit better, but if you're not going to the driving range, if you're not practicing what you've learned, probably you shouldn't have heavy expectations. Same thing is true, in this context. So what I'm seeing with the Fortune 500 businesses that I'm working with is that I'm working with them. We're creating new simulations. We're creating digital simulations so that they can practice, how they're going to approach their sales process using video conferencing, using remote means of communication, how they can harness web conferencing for maximum effect, how they can make sure that they can deal with the new objections that are coming, right? So companies are consolidating, brings huge challenges, but also huge opportunities. So what you will see is that the true elite, the way that they do this is they examine their sales process, they look at the way that they're going to market now, and they tweak and adjust that to accommodate a new way of doing things. But that's not all that they do. They then take the next step and they practice. They practice the implementation thereof. They run simulations. I work with a couple of companies where they actually have a policy in place that you cannot go, if you're a salesperson, you cannot go into a sales meeting without having simulated that sales meeting. So they have a threshold. This is not for meetings of deals that are very low in value, but above a certain threshold, you're not allowed. As a matter of fact, it's grounds for disciplinary action if you've gone into a sales meeting without having simulated that meeting. So this is what I'm seeing happening. So also the impact. Obviously when you're negotiating now digitally, and you're running simulations digitally, it's really easy to record that exchange, right? You could even, if you're smart, then you might even be able to convince some of your prospects that you can record them. You can record your sales calls, saying, we do this for quality control purposes. We assure you that this footage won't be used for anything else but process improvement and quality control. And ask them for their permission if you can record that call, that phone call, or that video call, because you want to analyze that. So this is what's going to be different in this digital world that we're in, is that we're going to have more data. We can gather data to help us to be very specific and really refine our approach. So I want to encourage you, this new world, this new digital world that we're moving into. Yes, it presents us with some challenges, but I think it uncovers far more opportunity than we might think, because we can be far more precise in our approach if we just adjust our thinking to really embrace the application of best practice sales negotiation consistent with every step in the sales process.
So on the back of that statement of as long as people are buying, people will be selling, what do you think will be the biggest change in the next 5 years? And what do you think will be needed in the next 5 years also?
Leena, I think probably the biggest change that we're going to see in the next 5 years is going to be the ability for us to be more scientific about the way that we sell. That we can be much more precise in the way that we sell as things get more and more digitized. As we digitize the interactions with our clients through the use of supporting tools, surveys, automation, digital means of communication, fulfillment, feedback loops, all these things that become a reality when our primary method of engagement is digital rather than it being a secondary mode of engagement. So for me, that's quite exciting, because I think you have the opportunity to multiply your efforts. We can be far more productive. We can be far more precise. So I think the importance of refining your people skills, your ability to connect with people, will become more prominent than it's been before the digital age. I think it's the one skill that will survive any change. Products will evolve and change. Services will evolve and change and disappear, but human nature will always remain the same. Human nature is the same, whether our primary mode of engagement is face-to-face, digital, whatever kind of remote interaction you pick, human nature is still the same. And if we can base our exchanges, our encounters with others on what we understand to be true about human nature, we will never cease to be relevant. So you need to learn more about people. You need to understand people better than you do your service, product, or solution, and you will be unusually successful. So I would focus on really sharpening my communication skills, really sharpening my sales negotiation skills, my people skills, my soft skills. Those are the key things that'll pull you through. If you can sell in any environment. You can sell yourself into a position of relative stability, no problem, if you really get your head around what makes people tick. So that would be my recommendation. Focus continuously on the development of your skills, specifically with regard to your people skills.
I love how you say that as a byproduct of the digitalization of sales, we will have more data. You're so right, as data is the next commodity that will hold more value than it does today. So thank you so much, Jan, for your professional insight today, and for your time, as I know that you're a busy man and your time is valuable. I know you have a very special gift and opportunity for our audience today. Would you like to tell them about that?
Leena, thank you so much for having me spend this time with you. I hope that you've enjoyed some of the thoughts, ideas, and insights that I've been able to share with you and your audience. I want to extend an invitation to anybody who's been with us during our time together, who find any resonance in what we've been talking about. If you see that some of these challenges you need to be equipped to face, as we progress into this new uncharted territory, then I want to invite you to book a strategy call with me. We've just released a brand new 6-week fully digital sales negotiation academy that will equip you with all the strategies, tools, tactics, and techniques that you can possibly need to be successful in this new digital age. It includes practical simulations, exercises, scripts, detailed maps of sales processes, every conceivable tool that you need to make sure that you don't just maintain competitive, but that you extend your competitive differentiation, that you can stay one step ahead of the change that has already happened and the change that's bound to follow. So it's very simple. You just click on the link below, this video frame over here, and you'll have the opportunity to schedule a meeting with me, and you'll complete a short little survey, and then we'll spend time together. The strategy call, there's no obligation. We may decide that we want to proceed with further exploration of common ground or not. So there's no pressure. If you want to discuss how we can apply some of these strategies to your specific circumstances, your specific environment, then go ahead and book the call. And once again, just thank you for your time. It was a great honor and a privilege to be here with you.
So guys, that brings us to the end of our time together this evening. Our technical team here have made it even easier. So if you just stay on until the end of the webinar, you'll be taken straight to Jan's diary, where you can book yourself in for that strategy call so you can make yourself even more valuable in the marketplace. Throughout this crisis, you guys have been asking me, Leena, where do I go for more sales coaching? Where do I go for more sales training so I can make myself better? Well, this is it. Learn from the people who have the results that you are looking for. Learn from the people who have what you want. And I don't know a man more qualified than the one who has closed £1,000,000 deals, been an unbeatable top salesperson, and then trained the elites of Fortune 500 companies. It may or may not be for you, but you might as well find out. But here is what I know for sure. As unemployment rises, and you can see that all around us, people losing their jobs, unemployment is going up day by day. As unemployment rises, the pool of available sales elites gets bigger and bigger and bigger, which is great for companies because they really have a choice. So the only ones that will survive are the ones who have a competitive edge. So now is the time to position yourself to thrive, especially now. All you need is the strategic steps to do so. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been our absolute pleasure. Hope this has been valuable for you and that you have gained some insights. And as always, we celebrate to your passion, your purpose, and your power. Ciao.